Hi, I'm Dave Skinner, CEO of National Tactical Security. Hey, thanks for joining me here today. I have over 36 years of experience in law enforcement operations, which includes the military and international operations. So what I'm going to share with you today is situational awareness and response to active threats. So a course overview, I want you to understand what the current threat is. I'm going to teach you about identifying suspicious behaviors and deception. We're going to talk about the NTS barrier method, and we're going to talk a little bit about situational awareness. So first we have to understand what the current threat is. So let's talk about some recent incidents. So everybody has heard about the Highland Park shooting over there in Chicago on the 4th of July, where an individual attacked a parade. And of course, everybody's heard about Uvalde, Texas, where this individual went into an elementary school and shot and killed a number of students and injuring a few more. And in Buffalo, New York, we had an individual target an attack against African-American individuals at a grocery store. Look, we've had an increase of criminal activities over the last 2 years that's unprecedented. We've seen civil unrest, carjackings, robbery, just to name a few. Crimes are getting more and more violent. So it's critical that you have good situational awareness and you're always aware of your surroundings. So workplace violence statistics. I want to talk about this for a minute because we all operate in different areas. So if you're inside the workplace, you should understand that 80% of active shooter incidents occur within the workplace. Now, we know that the media highlights those incidents that occur outside of the workplace, those incidents that occur within public settings. But you need to be aware that 80% are occurring inside the workplace. 25% of companies are literally unprepared for an active shooter incident, which means they have no emergency action plans. They haven't trained at all. They haven't even rehearsed on what they would do if they were to have some type of active threat situation happen inside their workplace. An estimated 2 million Americans fall victim to workplace violence every year. That's an astronomical number, but it can be avoided. It can be avoided if we pay attention to what's going on around us and we address those behaviors. So this is an interesting statistic I wanted to share with you. Did you know that you're 18 times more likely to experience workplace violence than a fire? That's unbelievable. Again, also preventable. So where does that threat come from? We've all heard of the insider threat and we've heard of the outsider threat, but what does that mean? The outsider threat means that somebody is attacking a location that is not affiliated with that location, whether it be the workplace, a movie theater, a school, a church, a shopping mall, somebody who has no real association with that environment. The insider threat, that's a little more dangerous. That's somebody who has internal knowledge of your workplace. It could be that disgruntled employee. It could be the employee's spouse or domestic partner. It could be one of your clients, or it could be building staff, somebody who is familiar with the building, the operations, the security plan. The point is that insider threat has inside knowledge, and that inside knowledge could be detrimental when it comes to them planning an attack and you being able to avoid that attack. So we've all heard this word profiling, and I hear a lot of people say profiling is bad. We don't want to profile people. Well, I'm here to tell you, you better be profiling people, but you need to do it right. We don't want to profile people and look at their race, their religion, their national origin, their gender, their age. If you do that, you're going to get yourself in trouble. What we do is threat profiling. We look at individuals' behaviors, and are those behaviors consistent with the environment that they're in? That is threat profiling. And it's critical that you learn how to do that and you learn what to do when you identify those threatening behaviors. That's what we're covering here today. So this is a great quote I wanted to share with you from Freud. He that has eyes to see and ears to hear may convince himself that no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. What does that tell us? It tells us that people communicate non-verbally. You've all seen it. When you're with somebody and you start seeing gestures and movements, you know what it is, you know what's on their mind, you know what they're communicating to you. 73 to 90% of communication is nonverbal. So it's really critical that when you're with somebody that has these suspicious behaviors, you're able to pick up on what their nonverbal communications are to see if there's some type of threat. Suspicious behaviors are the precursor for threatening situations. Again, that's why we have to have really good situational awareness, and we need to pick up on those behaviors. You need to trust your instincts. Don't ignore something because you think, well, that doesn't pertain to me, or try to rationalize the behaviors that you're seeing. Try to rationalize that in your head. Don't do that. Trust those instincts and then respond calmly and without hesitation. Have some authority there. Move with authority. Behave with authority. When you do that, people pick up on that. They're reading your nonverbal communications, and then they may back off. And also mentally record those observations, because if nothing else, at least you're a good witness for law enforcement and you can relay what it is you saw. Deception. First, we need to understand what deception is before we start talking about it. And Webster Dictionary says it's the act of causing someone to accept as true or valid what is false or invalid. And we know people are trying to deceive us all the time. And not a lot of times we pick up on it through those nonverbal communications. And if you combine that with verbal communications, it's really easy to read. Let me ask you this question. I bet, how many of you have children? I bet a number of hands are going up right now. Let me ask you this. How do you know when they're lying to you? I usually get a lot of people laughing and they're like, well, of course I know when they're lying to me. They're my children. Listen, those children grow up to be adults, and we can read adults just like we read children. We see the behaviors associated with what it is they're saying. We see all those nonverbals, how they approach us, their eye movement, their voice tone change. All of these different things would indicate that they're lying to us or they're about to lie to us. So here are some physical indicators that we can look for. Now, I'm just sharing a few of these with you. I know a lot of you are going to say, hey, look, I do these things all the time. I'm not being deceptive. We know that everybody does these things, but what is concerning is when these things are clustered together along with verbal communications and they become excessive. So these are just some of the things that we want you to look out for. Here's some additional indicators. Unusual sweating. Unusual attire for the environment or climate. For example, those of us who live here in Minnesota and we're out and it's maybe 85 degrees and we're out wearing like a long coat or a heavy coat. What is it you're trying to hide underneath your clothing? So we're looking for the bulges under the clothing that would indicate that somebody is trying to conceal a weapon. That's what we're talking about when we see that unusual attire. Repetitive, unusual touching of the body and facial area. When it's really, it's an unconscious move when somebody's trying to be deceptive and they're trying to hide, that they continue to try to hide their face by bringing their hand up to their face. Or maybe they have a weapon on their body somewhere and they repeatedly touch it with their elbow or their hand or their arm. Look for those movements. Hesitation when observing a person of authority. So if you have somebody, maybe they walk into a shopping mall or someplace else where you have like security officers or law enforcement, and all of a sudden they have that hesitation. Or maybe they even walk into an office space, they don't expect to see anybody, and all of a sudden they see you and there's that hesitation. Ask yourself, why is there hesitation? What it is that they're afraid of, or what it is that they are trying to hide. And then focused on movements of people and your physical security measures. If you see somebody heavily focusing on the people and their movements, and maybe some physical security measures like cameras, door locks, things like that, that's an indicator that they might be up to no good. So we use what we call behavior recognition and response. So what does that mean? Behavior recognition is to identify or recognize behaviors that are consistent with or abnormal for the time, location, and environment where the behaviors are observed based on your training, your education, your experience, and your familiarity with that environment. And your response, well, is the initiation of an appropriate response that's going to mitigate a threat to the immediate environment by means of action or reporting to the appropriate authorities. So we use what we call the barrier system. The barrier system is very simple. It's a very simple tool that you can use. It's an effective, simplistic system designed to identify suspicious behaviors when determining if a threat exists and then what actions that you should take based on what it is you're seeing. So the B is for behavior. And again, it's the way in which someone acts or conducts themselves within an environment that you're familiar with. A is for analysis. It's the process of evaluating those observed behaviors against the environment that you're operating in. And when you're analyzing, you're looking to see, is this appropriate behaviors for this environment? First R is for recognition. So unnatural behaviors should be recognized as potential threats, or at least people of interest. So again, we're looking for those behavior clusters that I talked about earlier, like hesitation or repeated touching of the face and those kinds of things. And then you should recognize that uncomfortable behavior versus normal behavior for that environment. R for response. So suspicious behaviors require an appropriate response to determine if the threat exists. So some of your options, one, you could call 911, get the law enforcement officers there so they can deal with this situation. Or if it's safe to do so, you can approach that subject and you can deal with it. Again, safety first, only if it's safe to do so, you can actually do that. Now, and if the individual is using force against you or others, and you feel that you're capable, you can also use reasonable and necessary force to stop a threat. Information. I want you to mentally collect information and formulate questions while witnessing or reacting to an event. So this allows you to assess the risk as you approach an individual. You're trying to figure out, what am I going to ask this individual so I can try to determine what it is they're up to. And again, safety first. So, and I want you to ask open-ended questions. Don't ask a question where you're going to get a yes or no. Ask a question where they have to explain themselves. So if you ask, hi, welcome to wherever you're at, how can I help you? That's not going to get a yes or no response. That's going to get some type of explanation, what's going to initiate a conversation. Some interview considerations. We talked about the insider threat and the outsider threat. Again, the outsider, well, with the outsider, you have the advantage. You know your environment, and the subject you're dealing with, they may not know your environment at all. But if it's an insider threat, now you have a disadvantage because the subject may know your environment just as well as you do, which poses a much bigger threat. Again, when you introduce yourself to an individual and you start setting yourself up for the questioning, when you ask that first question, I want you to not interrupt the individual as they start to answer. Even if there's a pause, ask your question and wait for that response. Nobody likes that awkward silence, but if you ask a question and you wait for them to respond, and then they give you that response, I want to encourage you to even pause again after that, because the individual will continue to talk, especially if they're nervous about what it is they're up to. So nobody likes that awkward silence, but put that back on the individual that you're talking to. And if there's an opportunity, I want you to use your cell phone to take a photo of the individual or maybe on a vehicle that they arrived in, but don't get caught doing it. Try to be inconspicuous about it so you can use that photo to share with law enforcement. Evaluation. So Once several indicators are observed, I want you to judge those clustered indicators against the baseline of the environment that you're in. If the subject behavior fits with the baseline, well, then no further action is necessary. And honestly, this is 99% of the time. Not everybody out there is a threat. Some people are just lost, or they're looking for someone, or whatever the case may be. So you have to use that baseline to see if it's consistent or not consistent. Now, if the behaviors do not fit with the situation, then a decision has to be made for what you're going to do to deal with this individual if a threat exists. And again, we talked about some of those options, like calling the police or actually confronting the individual. So what are some of the advantages of the barrier system? Well, number one, it provides you with a system. It provides you with a system to utilize so you can evaluate what's going on within your environment. And it may deter a bad guy, because now the bad guy sees you and your environment as a hard target and not a soft target. What does that mean? A hard target is an area that has security measures in place and people that are aware of their surroundings. Bad guys aren't looking for that. They're looking for the soft target where people are unaware of their surroundings. And of course, this is going to provide you with an opportunity to evaluate that situation. So you may learn answers regarding is there a threat? Is there no threat? Who are you dealing with? What is it that you're dealing with? When, where, and why? All of those questions that you need to answer to either file a police report or actually do a report on your own. So, how to react when a threat has been identified. Number one, you should know what your escape routes are. No matter where you're at, if you're in the grocery store or you're at somebody's house or a shopping mall, you should always be aware of what your escape routes are and where the exits are. Where can you find secure cover? If you have to hide, you don't see any escape route near you, you should be analyzing the area that you're in and say, that's where I would hide if a threat was to evolve right now. That is where I would go. And then, are you prepared to defend yourself and others? And you could defend yourself in many ways. What is the number one way to defend yourself? It's through effective communication. So you can de-escalate situations pretty effectively just by communicating with somebody. But it might mean that you have to use physical force. And are you prepared to do that? Are there any weapons around you that you can use? Maybe a stapler or a fire extinguisher or a coffee cup or something that you can use to defend yourself. Maybe it's even a firearm if you carry one. So this is what I want to leave you with when it comes to situational awareness. Always be aware of your surroundings. Always be observing people, vehicles, and items that are around you. You don't know where that threat's going to come from. I want you to question those suspicious behaviors and those activities that you're seeing. And always call the police if you believe there is a threat. We're not looking for heroes here. If you see a threatening situation, call 911 and get the police rolling your way right away. And then leave the area if you feel threatened. Again, we're not looking for heroes. Trust your instincts and get out of there if there's a threatening situation that could cause you harm. So in summary, we talked about deception. We talked about suspicious behaviors. We talked about the barrier method, which is an excellent tool, and we talked about situational awareness. Look, I hope this information helps you. I want you to start practicing using your situational awareness. Start using these tools, and I guarantee that they're going to help you out there. Okay? Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.